All right, I'm back for tomato sauce. We're just gonna do a classic red sauce, tomato sauce. For pizza is the original intent of when I did this recipe, was to get a nice pizza sauce. And then later in class, we amend it slightly to use it a red sauce with homemade pasta. So we kind of get two uses for it when we use it in class. But first, we're going to use it for pizza. So like I said, just a classic red sauce pizza sauce. Classic marinara is usually going to have a lot more vegetables to it, a lot more vinegars and other flavors to it. You definitely would start with your classic mirepoix, where this one does not have a mirepoix, it just has onions and garlic. So the classic marinara and this tomato sauce are going to be slightly different, but we're going to make it work for pizza sauce, and like I said, later we will amend it, and we can use it for a red sauce to use with pasta. So the first thing I'm going to do, take a look at my recipe, and take a look at whatever mise en place I need to do. What do I need to do? What can I get done on my cutting board before I get any heat on my pan here? I don't want to get any heat on my pan until I know that I'm ready with all my vegetables. So with my cutting board and knife, I can certainly get my onion diced and my garlic chopped. So let's take a look at what we need for that. So for my small diced yellow onion, I want 1 cup. 1 cup small diced yellow onion. And if we remember my dicing of my onion, I have my half onion here peeled. It's been sliced in half through the root end. And that root end is still intact. It's going to help hold these little fingers together. And then I'll make these kind of rainbow cuts going around. So cutting, but not cutting through the roots. Cutting to the roots, but not through it, because I want that to hold all my little fingers together, my onion fingers, so these fingers don't have to work so hard. And my dice does not have to be oh so perfect, because this is a tomato sauce. We are going to end up pureeing this at the end. So if my dices aren't the most perfect dices I've ever seen, as long as they're somewhat consistent, so I don't have big pieces not getting cooked while little pieces are burning, that is okay. We will puree this so no one will know if your pieces were not so perfect to begin with. All right, 1 cup diced yellow onion, 1 cup. Now let's move on to my garlic. 1 tablespoon. 1 tablespoon chopped fresh garlic. These kind of a smash to get the paper off. This one just has a little blemish. I'll slice that off of there. The rest of that's still good. And this, I am cooking this sauce for 15 or 20 minutes. So whatever size I get from my garlic, if it's, again, not pretty or not the smallest, it's going to get pureed at the end. And it's also going to have quite a bit of cooking time to it. Get off me, little garlic paper. So if I've got bigger chunks of garlic, I'm not going to worry too much about it because I'm going to cook it down. I'm also going to grind it. I'm going to cut down off all those little root ends of the garlic. And then now cut them in half. Pick out the germ if I can. If it's small, probably not going to worry about it too much. And then now I can get my garlic to the edge of my board, give it a quick smash. This just kind of helps my chopping process. There we go. I think that looks good. Alright, so that's everything I need to do with my cutting board, so let me get this cleaned up. Then we can look at the rest of our mise en place. What else can I gather? Alright, let's take a look at the rest of my mise en place. My diced tomatoes in juice. I am just using a 28-ounce can. Just got this at Winco, obviously, but a 28-ounce can. If for some reason you have the giant cans, or maybe some smaller cans, or just wanting to measure it by cups, it would be 3.5 cups. But simply put, one 28-ounce can of diced tomatoes in juice. I'm going to need 1 tablespoon of olive oil. I'll just get this into my pot right now, because I know that's what we're going to start with. I don't need to dirty a prep bowl. But a tablespoon of olive oil. I have my 1 cup of small diced onion, my 1 tablespoon of chopped garlic, tomato paste for 3 tablespoons, 3 tablespoons of tomato paste. This is going to help us get a nice rich tomatoey flavor. It's going to definitely help with our thickness of our sauce. Because my difference of a nice tomato sauce and a pizza sauce is I want my pizza sauce to be a little thicker than a regular red sauce or a pasta sauce, because I want that tomato sauce to be nice and thick to hold all my ingredients. I want it to hold all my cheese and my pizza toppings. I don't want everything just sliding right off. So my pizza sauce, my red sauce for pasta, it's going to be a little thicker. Thicker pizza sauce. It's going to hold all my stuff on top of my pizza so it doesn't slide off. All right, basil leaves, fresh basil leaves. Got nice fresh basil leaves here. And the recipe calls for 3 to 4 fresh leaves. So this is going to be dependent on maybe how big your leaves are. If they're small, maybe do 4, maybe even 5 if they're really small. So 3 to 4 basil leaves, fresh basil leaves. Talked about fresh and dry herbs before, so knowing that these are fresh basil leaves, that might cue us to know that we're going to add this at the end of cooking. Unlike my dry oregano. Well, it's dry. It needs some time to hydrate back into what I'm cooking. So I'm going to add it at the beginning of cooking. And for this recipe, I'm going to add 1 teaspoon. 1 teaspoon dry oregano. And brown sugar, oops, wrong one. Brown sugar, 2 tablespoons. 2 tablespoons brown sugar. Help give us a little bit of sweetness, help kind of counterbalance all the acid we have going on with all the tomato ingredients in our dish. So now all my mise en place is here in front of me. I have everything I need. I have my pot, I have my spatula, all my ingredients measured out. So now I'm ready to get some heat onto my pan and start making my sauce. All right. So in a large saucepan, cover the bottom with olive oil. So I have my decent sized saucepan here, medium to large saucepan. I've put the 1 tablespoon of olive oil in the bottom of the pan. I'm going to heat this on a medium-ish heat. I have gas flame here, so a medium is probably going to be just fine. If you have an electric stove, you might want to go to a medium-high or so. But we're going to want to saute our onions and our garlic. I have all my mise en place kind of in a row of an order of when I'm going to want to use them, kind of pre-read through my recipe to make sure that everything is not only close, but I like to put them in order so that when I'm looking for them, I know that they're just kind of right here. So my first blank here is olive oil. So using a large saucepan, cover the bottom with olive oil, saute the onions over medium heat, saute until translucent. So we've done that before, translucent with our chowder, I think. And that's just to where they're kind of see-through. Before I add my onions, I want to hear a little bit more of a sizzle than what I already hear. I'm going to wait just a little bit, get a little bit more heat. So this is a scenario where I'm preheating my pan and I'm preheating my oil. My olive oil is going to have a little bit of a higher smoke point, so I'm not going to be super careful. Well, I will be careful with my heat, but it's not as delicate as butter. If butter was in here, I'm going to be really delicate with my heat. I'm going to take my time and go really slow. Olive oil eventually will have smoke. It does have a smoke point. It will eventually burn. It's going to be a lot more resilient than butter, though. So I can put a little bit more heat on it than I would butter. So get these moving around. We want that nice translucent, so like before that opaque white goes away and it's a little bit more see-through, so keep that in mind. I don't really want super brown caramelized. I can get a little bit of caramelization happening because I'm just making a red sauce. I'm not going to notice too much caramelization in the color because I'm going to have a red sauce, but I'll notice it maybe in the flavor. It'll be a delicious caramelized flavor with my onion. And then notice that I have plenty of surface area on the bottom of my pan. You can still see some bits of the bottom of my pan. My pan isn't completely crowded at the bottom where I have multiple layers of onion. So that's going to help us get a nice even sweat or saute with our onions here, that it's not super crowded. If this was looking really crowded, I might want to consider getting to another pan, again, with a bigger surface area. So a bigger area on the bottom for these onions to spread out so they're not kind of all on top of each other and creating like a large layer of onions. I won't be getting that saute kind of motion here, or that saute reaction. It will just kind of steam and sweat, and they won't get any color. It will just end up being kind of a soupy, steamy, oniony situation on the bottom of the pan. And then just as we've done before, my onions are first. My garlic is on standby. My garlic is patiently waiting here, because if I put them in together, this garlic is going to start to burn before my onion is doing what I want it to do. So onions go first, garlic goes second, and the garlic tends to be really, really quick. It's cut a lot smaller. It has a different sugar content. It gets to caramelize a lot quicker than the onions do. So just be aware, we're doing these different stages just like our recipe says. Because it says here that once our onions are translucent, we're going to add the garlic and saute about a minute until golden. So your second blank is golden. And remember, you have all freedom to be turning down your heat, turning up your heat. If you're noticing that things are getting oh so fast, quickly hot, then turn it down, or pull the pan away from the heat if you have to. Do what you can to cool it down. Or if it's just nothing's really happening, turn your heat up. You have all the freedom to be doing those things. It's just kind of paying attention to what's going on in your pot, paying attention to what's going on your stovetop. We want a little bit of heat here. Steam is okay, smoke is bad. All right, some of my tiny, tiny pieces of onions and some of the edges are turning a little bit brown, so I think it's a good time to add my garlic. So let's read on before I do that. So I want to get my garlic golden, and then I'm going to add my tomato paste and oregano and cook for a few minutes, letting it get a little bit of color on the pan on a medium heat. Then I will quickly add the diced tomatoes and the brown sugar. All right, so blank 3 is tomato paste. So I'm going to get my garlic in there, let it get brown. Then I'm going to be adding my paste and my dry herb, and then I'm going to add my liquid product, which is going to be my diced tomatoes in juice. So this is going to all kind of happen back to back pretty quickly because I want some color on my garlic. I want this to be fragrant, but I don't want it to burn. And then I want to also kind of get my tomato paste in here without any heat, or without any liquid, sorry, without any liquid, and kind of wake up my tomato paste and my dry herb here. And dry herbs we've talked about, they're dry. They've sat on a shelf. We want to get them here in this early stage of cooking so that they can wake up. The oil in the pan can kind of help rehydrate it and get us anything else that might be tasty coming out of that dry herb, and it's got lots of time to rehydrate and make tasty flavors in our sauce. So you may notice, look at the bottom of my pan, it's getting color on it. The tomato paste is starting to kind of caramelize and stick to it. This is great. This is good. If I scrape hard enough, it'll come off. It's going to come off once I add my liquid product here. But that's what I want to see. I want to see that this tomato paste is starting to get some color on the bottom of my pan. It's staying kind of in a ball. That's what tomato paste will do. It's clinging to the onions. But as I'm moving it around, it's starting to get some color on the bottom of my pan. That's perfect. That's exactly what I want to see. A little bit of color. It's sticking just a tad. It's not burning. It's on the edge of burning, so let's get my liquid product in here. So my can of tomato paste, or sorry, my can of diced tomatoes. My can of diced tomatoes, that 28-ounce can of diced tomato. Carefully add that, because you have a dry, hot pan and now you're adding liquid, so carefully add that liquid product to your dry, hot pan. And then the 2 tablespoons of brown sugar is going to go with that as well. So now the only ingredient I have left is my basil. It's going to go at the end. So now that I have my liquid product in there, I want to be sure that I'm scraping the sides and the bottom of that pot, because I had all that stuff sticking to the bottom of the pot. I don't know if you can see it. You can kind of see it as I scrape it away. Getting really difficult. But all that stuff that was sticking to the bottom of my pot has now come up, and now it's incorporated into the sauce here. So everything that was sticking, I scraped down really, really well. It was nice and golden. It wasn't burnt. If it's burnt, I might want to move to a different pot so I'm not getting all the burnt, carbonized, bitter pieces into my sauce. But scraping that up, getting it into the sauce. And then let's catch up with our blanks here. So my first blank was olive oil, second blank is golden, third one is add the tomato paste, and then my fourth one is brown sugar. So that all happened really quickly because I added my garlic and then my tomato paste and then my oregano and then my diced tomatoes and my brown sugar, salt, and pepper. So my fourth blank is brown sugar. So I've added that, and now let's add a little bit of salt and pepper. I don't need to go super crazy with the salt and pepper that I'm going to add here, because I can always adjust the seasoning when it's done simmering. It's going to have a little bit of simmer time to it. So I maybe did half a teaspoon of pepper and half a teaspoon of salt. Stir well and let the sauce come to a simmer. Your fifth blank is simmer. We're going to let this sauce come to a simmer. We will let simmer for about 15 minutes. All right. I potentially have everything here I need for a sauce. I am going to blend it here later, but I want it to simmer for 15 minutes. So what am I going to know that it's simmering? Well, simmering is going to be great because I'm going to see some steam leaving the pot. That's a good sign. Steam, not smoke. Little tiny bubbles, maybe around the edges. That's a good sign. Big giant bubbles are not a good sign. You will eventually scorch the bottom and burn the bottom. You don't want that. So little bubbles are good. Some steam is good. No lid. You don't want a lid for this. If it starts getting bigger bubbles, that's your cue to turn it down. So if you're worried about it splattering your oven and your stove making a mess, then turn your heat down. And just keep an eye on it and make sure that we are having the small simmer, small bubbles. The longer I simmer this, the more I let it reduce, let the steam evaporate and let it reduce, the thicker finished product sauce I'm going to have. So this says to let it simmer for 15 minutes, but you have half an hour to let it simmer, then sure, let it simmer for half an hour. It's just going to get thicker and thicker as it just kind of reduces down. So make sure your time of 15 minutes is happening once it comes to the simmer. I turn this down now, I'm starting to see some bubbles, so I'll start my timer here shortly when I see a really nice simmer with constant little tiny bubbles happening. And then while it does simmer, do make sure that you are stirring it occasionally. You don't have to stop and kind of babysit it once you have a nice temperature happening. Once you see that it's holding at a nice simmer, you can usually take a break and walk away for a second. But do stir it occasionally, just to make sure it's not scorching on the bottom. So once it simmers for about 15 minutes, we're going to come back at our finishing fresh herbs. Then we'll get it blended. And then we'll taste for seasoning here. So I'm going to let this simmer for at least 15 minutes, if not more. All right, my 15 minutes has passed. I'm going to turn this down to low. My next step is to tear the basil by hand and add it to the sauce. I just want to get it a little bit smaller than it already is. Then I can add it to the sauce. And then it says taste and adjust seasoning. So I can certainly adjust the salt and pepper seasoning now. But I'm going to blend it and then taste it again when it's done blending. Because then the basil will be all blended up in there. Alright, I think that's good for now. Like I said, I'm going to taste it again when it's all blended. You could also adjust seasoning with the brown sugar. Some people want a little sweeter, so you could definitely add more brown sugar if you wanted to. Salt and pepper is always available as well. So now we want to blend this. What are we going to blend this with? We're going to use an immersion stick blender for this. And it has just a little blade that spins around once we plug it in and press go. So we just want to be careful with this. And I'll show you how this works properly. Alright, so my immersion stick blender, it's a stick blender because it looks like a stick. We want to also submerge this into liquid, whatever it is that we're blending. So we want something to kind of already be somewhat liquidy, like a soup or a sauce. But we want to make sure that our level of stuff or liquid is beyond this little cap we see here. So we want this to be a little higher, otherwise it's going to spit and spatter out the sides here. Then like I said, I have these blades that spin around. So once I plug it in and press go, those blades go around. So may not need to be said, but no fingers in the end, ever. Not even when it's plugged, not when it's unplugged. I wouldn't you would think I wouldn't have to say that, but I've seen some things. So no fingers in there. That goes really fast. It may not feel crazy sharp right now, so when you're washing it, do be careful because it will cut you. But once that power is behind it, it's quite sharp. So we want to make sure that we get this down into our liquid first, and then we can press go and start blending carefully. If you don't have an immersion stick blender like this, you could certainly blend it in a blender. You could blend it probably in like a food processor or something. Just be careful and maybe let it cool a little bit, because with going into a separate container, obviously you're dealing with some hot sauce, right? So you just want to be careful, maybe let it cool off for like 20 minutes, maybe even an hour, because now you're having to transfer this hot sauce into another vessel, blend it, and who knows where it's going, right? Hopefully we're using a lower speed and then working our way up to a higher speed, so we're not getting hot sauce all over us somewhere. So please make sure that you are being careful if you're having to transfer this to another blending device. but that's why I like this stick blender, because I don't have to transfer it. So I have this on a hot pad here. And then when I put this in here, it's not as deep as I would like. So what I'm going to do is make my pan just a little bit deeper so it does have something for it to kind of blend here. And I like to kind of pulse it just to start. And then as it starts to blend up, it kind of does that kind of rotating around for you. So you can kind of move it around at first to get things started, and then it just kind of mixes for you. That's looking good. Unplug it. The other thing that's nice about these guys is that they come apart. So part you're needing to wash just comes apart. So now I can taste and adjust seasoning one more time. I can see bits of basil in there. That's good. Just a little sweet, kind of counterbalance that acid from the tomato. Really nice. Like I said, brown sugar, salt, and pepper would be great ways to adjust your seasoning. If you wanted more of that fresh basil, you could definitely add some more of that fresh basil if you wanted to, if you had it. If you buy it at the store, you're usually stuck with one of those clamshells, so you can certainly do that way. So our last blank is taste and adjust seasoning. Should be used to that one by now. Always taste, taste, taste. Taste and adjust seasoning is your last blank. You're going to blend with that immersion blender till smooth and to your desired smoothness. Maybe you don't want it super smooth. Maybe you want a little chunky. Then don't blend it so much. Or maybe blend half of it and don't blend the other half and put them together. You can either use right away, let it cool, and then freeze it. So I am probably going to let it cool and then put it in a quart container. But I want to let it cool in like a flat container for my food danger zone. So I don't want to be freezing this while it's hot. So I want it to get it down to a cool temperature. So maybe put it out into like a pan of some kind, like a shallow pan. And once it's cool, I can put it into something where I'm going to freeze it and then go ahead and freeze it. But make sure it's cold first. And then there you have your tomato pizza sauce.